In 1997, the Eaton family's personal stake in their legendary department store empire was worth $189 million. By the year 2000, just 3 years later, it was worth nothing. Zero. The Eaton name, which had been synonymous with Canadian retail for 130 years, was being stripped off buildings across the country. The family that once controlled 60% of all department store sales in Canada, that had pioneered the money-back guarantee, built shopping malls that became national landmarks, and published a catalogue found in virtually every Canadian home, had lost it all. This wasn't a stock market crash. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was a slow-motion train wreck caused by arrogance, denial, and a family's stubborn refusal to admit their world was changing. Today, we're uncovering exactly how one of North America's greatest retail dynasties destroyed itself from the inside out. If this kind of story intrigues you, where we dig deep into the financial mysteries and business disasters that shaped our world while everyone else was sleeping, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Chapter 1. From $6,400 to retail royalty. Our story begins in 1869, when a 35-year-old Irish immigrant named Timothy Eaton paid $6,500 for a dry goods store on Yonge Street in Toronto. Timothy wasn't just another shopkeeper. He was a revolutionary. At a time when most stores operated on credit, haggling over prices and refusing returns, Timothy Eaton introduced 3 radical concepts: fixed prices clearly marked on every item, cash-only sales, and his famous guarantee, goods satisfactory or money refunded. Canadians had never seen anything like it. No more arguing with shopkeepers, no more wondering if you paid too much, no more being stuck with shoddy merchandise. Timothy Eaton was selling something more valuable than goods. He was selling trust. And Canadians responded by opening their wallets. By the 1880s, Eaton's had become so successful that Timothy launched a mail-order catalogue. This wasn't just a product list, it was a lifeline to rural Canada. Families in remote communities could suddenly access the same goods as city dwellers. The Eaton's catalogue became known as the Homesteader's Bible and the greatest influence in the Canadianization of the West. It brought pianos to prairie farms, wedding dresses to mining towns, and modern conveniences to places that had never seen them. When Timothy Eaton died in 1907, he left behind a retail empire unlike anything Canada had ever seen. His sons John Craig Eaton and later his grandson John David Eaton continued the expansion. By 1930, Eaton's controlled 60% of all department store sales in Canada. Think about that for a moment. 6 out of every $10 spent in Canadian department stores went to Eaton's. They weren't just dominating the market, they were the market. The Eaton family lived like royalty. They built Eardley, a massive estate north of Toronto with gardens designed by the same landscape architect who planned New York's Central Park. They hosted prime ministers, they influenced federal elections. The saying went, Timothy built a store, but his sons built an empire. But here's where the cracks started forming. Invisible at first, like hairline fractures in a foundation. The 3rd and 4th generations of Eatons, the great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren of Timothy, were born into unimaginable wealth. They attended elite private schools. They summered in Europe. They joined exclusive clubs. They learned to sail yachts, not sell goods. And most crucially, they developed an attitude that would eventually destroy everything Timothy had built. The belief that the Eaton name alone would guarantee success, regardless of what they actually did. Chapter 2. Warning signs ignored. By the 1970s, the retail landscape was changing, but the Eaton family refused to see it. 4 brothers, John Craig Eaton II, Frederick, Thor, and George, had taken over leadership of the company. These men had grown up in privilege, educated at Upper Canada College and running the business like a private fiefdom. They made decisions based on tradition and family pride, not market research or financial analysis. The first major blunder came in 1976. After over 10 years of hemorrhaging money, Eaton's announced it was shutting down its legendary catalog operation. The Spring-Summer 1976 edition would be the last. Over 9,000 mail-order employees lost their jobs overnight. The catalog had been losing money, yes, but it had also been the company's most powerful marketing tool, keeping the Eaton's brand in millions of Canadian homes. Meanwhile, their competitor Simpson Sears was thriving with their catalog business. Understanding what the Eatons didn't, the catalog wasn't just about mail orders, it was about brand presence. But the Eaton brothers weren't worried. They had a grand plan: shopping malls. In 1977, the Toronto Eaton Centre opened to enormous fanfare. A gleaming, modern shopping destination in the heart of downtown Toronto. It was architecturally stunning, featuring over 200 stores and the famous flock of Canada geese sculptures suspended from the vaulted glass ceiling. Canadians lined up on opening day, eager to experience this retail wonderland. The Eaton Centre was genuinely successful, but it created a dangerous illusion. The family concluded they were still retail geniuses, that the Eaton magic was intact. They couldn't see the truth. The Eaton Centre succeeded because it was a mall, not because it was Eaton's. The other 200 stores in the complex were attracting customers just as effectively as the anchor Eaton's store. The mall concept was brilliant, but it didn't mean Eaton's as a department store chain was thriving. Throughout the 1980s, competition intensified. American retailers began eyeing Canada. Walmart was coming. Discount chains were multiplying. Consumers were changing, becoming more price conscious, more willing to shop at multiple stores instead of remaining loyal to one brand. The traditional department store model, where you bought everything from furniture to groceries to clothes under one roof, was dying. Eaton's response? Essentially nothing. While competitors renovated stores, invested in new technology, and studied consumer behavior, the Eatons maintained their grand old stores without substantial updates. Stores that had once been landmarks in their communities fell into disrepair. The carpets were worn, the lighting was dim, the merchandise selection was outdated, but the Eaton family seemed paralyzed, unable or unwilling to make the tough decisions necessary for survival. There was an internal culture problem too. Employees called it the "don't tell me how to run my store" attitude. The family, particularly those in leadership positions, dismissed advice from retail consultants, market researchers, and even their own experienced managers. They viewed suggestions for change as personal attacks on the family legacy. One executive later recalled, they acted like they were doing Canada a favor by staying in business. By the early 1990s, Eaton's market share had collapsed from 60% to just 12%. They were now ahead of only Kmart Canada. The Bay, Sears, Walmart, and Zellers were all eating their lunch. Financial losses were mounting, but the family kept the company private, refusing outside investment or oversight. After all, Eaton's was the family business. It had been for 120 years. Surely that meant something. Chapter 3. The 1997 Bankruptcy. February 27th, 1997. That's the date everything came crashing down. After months of denying rumors and insisting everything was fine, Eaton's filed for protection from its creditors under the Companies Creditors Arrangement Act. The company owed over $300 million and was completely out of cash. The news shocked Canada. The Eatons, was bankrupt. It was like learning that Canada itself might disappear. This wasn't just a business story, it was a national trauma. Thousands of employees suddenly didn't know if they'd have jobs. Suppliers were terrified they'd never be paid. Customers held gift cards they feared would become worthless pieces of plastic. George Eaton, the youngest of the brothers and the company president, faced the media looking shell-shocked. For decades, the family had operated with an air of invincibility. Now that illusion was shattered in the most public way possible. The courts appointed a restructuring monitor to oversee the company. For the first time in its history, Eaton's was no longer fully controlled by the Eaton family. The bankruptcy revealed the depth of Eaton's problems. Inventory management was a disaster. Some stores had massive overstock of products nobody wanted, while popular items were constantly sold out. The company's computer systems were outdated, running on technology from the 1970s, while competitors were using sophisticated point-of-sale systems that tracked customer preferences and optimized inventory in real time. Employee morale was a rock bottom. Workers felt betrayed by a family that had preached loyalty while running the company into the ground. During the bankruptcy protection period, Eaton's closed dozens of stores, laid off thousands of employees, and negotiated with suppliers to reduce what they owed. George Eaton and his brother Frederick worked with restructuring experts to create a survival plan. They secured a line of credit from General Electric Capital, which would provide the cash flow needed to keep operating. In 1997, after months under bankruptcy protection, Eaton's emerged with a restructuring plan. The family had shed debt, closed unprofitable locations, and promised a new era of competitiveness. George Eaton told reporters, "We've learned our lessons, we're ready to compete." But they hadn't learned anything. Not really. Chapter 4. The Failed Comeback. The 1998 holiday shopping season was supposed to be Eaton's triumphant return. Instead, it was a catastrophe. Sales were weak. The important Christmas period, which typically generates 30 to 40% of annual revenue for retailers, was particularly disappointing. When Eaton's released its results in early 1999, they showed a net loss of $72 million for 1998. $72 million in a single year. After emerging from bankruptcy, how was this possible? The restructuring had addressed Eaton's debt, but it hadn't addressed the fundamental problem. Canadians didn't want to shop at Eaton's anymore. The stores were still outdated. The merchandise was still uninspiring. The prices weren't competitive. And the Eaton's brand, once synonymous with quality and trust, now carried the stench of failure and bankruptcy. Meanwhile, competitors were thriving. Walmart had become the dominant force in Canadian retail, offering everyday low prices that Eaton's couldn't match. The Bay had renovated its stores and repositioned itself as upscale. Sears Canada was performing well with its catalog and retail combination. Even Zellers, the discount chain, had found its niche. Eaton's was stuck in no man's land, too expensive to compete with discounters, too outdated to compete with upscale department stores, and without any clear identity that would give customers a reason to choose them over alternatives. In June 1999, CEO George Kosic resigned. Kosic had been brought in from outside the family in 1997 to lead the turnaround, but even he couldn't overcome the structural problems and family resistance to real change. His departure signaled that something was seriously wrong. Throughout summer 1999, there were desperate attempts to find a buyer or a partner. Talks were held with potential investors. Various restructuring plans were discussed. The company tried to put on a brave face, with executives insisting they just needed a bit more time, a bit more capital, one more Christmas season to prove themselves. But by August, time had run out. The line of credit from General Electric Capital was nearly exhausted. Suppliers were refusing to ship merchandise without payment up front. Employees were updating their resumes. And the Eaton family, after 130 years, finally faced the unthinkable. Chapter 5. The End of an Empire. August 24th, 1999. Eaton's filed for bankruptcy protection again, this time for good. The company announced it was liquidating everything and closing all remaining stores. There would be no comeback, no last-minute rescue, no miracle turnaround. After 130 years, Eaton's was dead. The liquidation was brutal and undignified. Everything was marked down and sold off. Merchandise, fixtures, furniture, even the carpets and light fixtures. Customers who had shopped at Eaton's for decades walked through the stores one last time, many with tears in their eyes, buying bits of nostalgia at 70% off. The Eaton family's financial interest, which had been worth $189 million during the initial public offering plans in the mid-90s, was now worth nothing. The family that once controlled an empire was left with little more than their real estate holdings and personal wealth. The company itself, the legacy of Timothy Eaton, was gone. Sears Canada eventually purchased many of the leases and some of the assets, converting some former Eaton's locations to Sears stores. But by 2002, even those conversions were complete, and the last vestiges of the Eaton's brand were removed from Canadian retail. The Eaton name survived only on buildings the family owned, like the Toronto Eaton Centre, but even there, it was a reminder of past glory, not present success. The collapse had wider implications for Canada. Over 15,000 employees lost their jobs in the final closure. Entire shopping districts, particularly in smaller cities where Eaton's had been the anchor store, struggled as foot traffic disappeared. Landlords lost a major tenant. Suppliers lost a major customer. The Canadian retail landscape fundamentally shifted, with American chains like Walmart filling the void left by Eaton's departure. For the Eaton family, the psychological impact was profound. They had been Canadian royalty, the Kennedys of Canada's business world. Their name had meant something. Now it meant failure. Family gatherings became difficult. Blame was assigned. Relationships fractured. Some family members retreated from public life entirely. Others tried to rebuild in different industries, but always with the shadow of Eaton's collapse hanging over them. Industry analysts and business historians began dissecting what went wrong. The consensus was clear. Eaton's died from a combination of arrogance, complacency, and generational wealth that insulated the decision makers from the consequences of their decisions. The third and fourth generations of Eatons had confused their inheritance with their competence. They believed the family name and legacy would protect them from market forces, competition, and economic reality. They were wrong. Chapter 6: What we can learn. So what can we learn from the Eaton's disaster? Because this isn't just a Canadian story or just a retail story. It's a universal story about pride, change, and the dangers of resting on past success. First, understand that your reputation is not a moat. Timothy Eaton built an incredible brand based on trust, innovation, and customer service. But by the 1990s, that goodwill had been squandered. The Eaton family assumed their name would carry them forward indefinitely. In reality, customers care about what you're doing for them right now, not what your great-grandfather did 100 years ago. Brand equity can evaporate faster than you think, especially when competitors are offering better value, better service, or better experiences. Second, generational wealth creates a dangerous distance from reality. When you've never worried about money, when you've never faced real consequences for bad decisions, when you're insulated by family wealth and privilege, it becomes almost impossible to understand what your customers are experiencing. Third, refusing outside help is often a sign of deeper problems. The Eaton family kept the company private and dismissed advice from retail consultants, turnaround experts, and market researchers. They saw outside input as an insult, as if their family legacy gave them superior knowledge that couldn't be questioned. This is a classic trait of failing organizations. The belief that internal knowledge trumps external expertise. Fourth, understand the difference between assets and operations. The Eaton family made money on real estate. The Toronto Eaton Centre was genuinely valuable, but they confused real estate success with retail success. Just because you own a profitable mall doesn't mean you know how to run a competitive department store chain. Fifth, recognize that incremental decline is harder to address than sudden crisis. If Eaton's had faced a single catastrophic event, a fire, a lawsuit, a scandal, the family might have rallied and made dramatic changes. Instead, they experienced slow, steady decline over decades. Market share dropped from 60% to 50 to 40 to 30. Each year was just slightly worse than the last. This gradual erosion is psychologically easier to deny. You can always blame external factors. Promise things will get better next quarter. Convince yourself it's just a temporary setback. Sixth, loyalty is earned continuously, not stored up for hard times. Eaton's had generated enormous goodwill over its first 100 years. But by the 90s, that goodwill was gone. Employees felt betrayed by layoffs and mismanagement. Customers felt disappointed by outdated stores and poor selection. Suppliers felt burned by payment problems and bankruptcy. You can't run up a loyalty account in good times and expect to withdraw from it indefinitely during bad times. Finally, the most important lesson. No empire is too big to fail. The Eaton family thought they were invincible. They controlled 60% of the market. They'd survived for 130 years. Their name was on buildings across Canada. Surely that meant they were safe, that they were permanent, that the rules of business competition didn't fully apply to them. They were catastrophically wrong. The Eaton story is a tragedy because it was completely preventable. Timothy Eaton had built something remarkable, a company based on innovation, customer service, and trust. His descendants destroyed it through arrogance, complacency, and an unwillingness to change. If stories like this, where we uncover the economic events that shaped our world while most people weren't paying attention, fascinate you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started with these financial educational mysteries.